Hey everyone, welcome to my presentation on WordPress about unit testing. My name is Barry Kooij. I work at Teams, and yeah, let's dive right into it. So let's start with talking about the opposite of unit testing. Let's start with manual testing. So while a lot of people do this, not a lot of people are aware that they're actually doing this, that this is actually a thing. Manual testing is basically testing whatever you're doing live. Sorry about that. Where was I? So yeah, whatever they're doing. So imagine you have a blog and you'll do some changes. Some people even do it on their website live through FTP. A lot of people do have local development environments, but do it just test what they just built and yeah, try to check out if it works, forgetting to test other things. And so manual testing is really error prone. It's pretty time consuming because every time you deploy something, every time you commit something, you got to test what you did, if it works. And there's a single point of knowledge. So you created a functionality, you know what you did, you know where to test, but say for whatever reason you leave the company or get sick, that knowledge is lost. So your colleagues or whoever adopts the product or project will not know how to actually test your code, what it was that you actually created, what you were meant to do. So a lot of people end up like this. Don't always test my code, but when I do it in production. They call this cowboy coding. Well, I think it's obvious to say this is a bad practice. So what's the alternative? It's called unit testing. Unit testing is the complete opposite of manual testing, so it's time saving. It will cost you some time, depending on the size of your product or project, to build them. But you'll see as your project gets older, as your product gets more audience, more users, you'll see that these unit tests actually save you a lot of time. You can easily just test every commit and run 200, 300, 400, 500 tests in a few minutes, even seconds, depending on how heavy your tests are. You're a lot less likely to miss things, right? So we developers tend to get focused in this feature that we need to build, and then test that feature as good as we can. But it happens a lot, and it happened to me as well, that while building this new awesome feature, you accidentally broke something that seemed completely unrelated to what you just built, and unit test got you covered in that. Whereas in manual testing, you probably notice it when deployed, hopefully, to a testing or staging environment. And if you don't have those, you'll find out when you push it live. And your knowledge is in code. So if you've been working for a company for a couple of years, you wrote some awesome functionality, some awesome features, and you've written good unit tests for them, then that knowledge will stay there. You can leave for whatever reason, and your colleague or whoever takes over your product will be able to test everything that you've built. So what is a unit test? This is a quote I found online, which I really like. So a unit test is an automated piece of code that invokes a unit of work in the system and then checks a single assumption about the behavior of that unit of work. What I really like about the description of this is that, besides it describes what a unit test is that it includes the single assumption, which is something that I think is really important while writing unit tests, is that your unit test tests one unit of work, right? So one functionality, one piece of functionality, but also tests it for a single assumption. So you're only testing if you are, for example, able to add something to your cart, which is, and then a lot of extra assumptions like virtual product, in a variation, etc., etc. All right. So what happens to a lot of people, so I've been noticing that unit tests are getting more and more popular, which is a good thing, but it still happens a lot in this order. So people write code and then they write tests. So what happens is that in the case of WordPress, you'll be writing your code in PHP, and PHP isn't that strict at all, which results in that a lot of people, for example, write methods or functions that can return different types as a return statement. So say if it succeeds, it returns the actual object, while if it fails, it returns a Boolean. Things like these are, I actually like to call them mistakes like these, but that's a different discussion. Like these are easily made, and while writing code, it might seem like the best option to go for at the time. And then when you're ready for testing and you start writing unit tests, you'll find out that a lot of decisions that you made in your code weren't as thought through as they should have been, right? So you'll find out that you need to test things in a specific way that you didn't think of before, or that you thought of but wrote in a way that is completely not testable. So because you're already at the end of your project and your code is depending on itself and on everything else you wrote, you'll just go for the quick fixes, change some return statements, and really not the way to do it. The way to do it is to write your tests before your code. So obviously you start with your architectural phase, and you'll make decisions in what kind of classes you'll create and which design patterns you'd like to use to implement, and after that you can either do some documentation, which I also like to see that people use that. For example, UML, and write some test cases and some scenarios, some unit cases, and then from that write your tests. And this might sound really boring and like a strange way to approach your project, but by doing so, you'll think of so many edge cases that you wouldn't think of while you start writing your code, and you start looking at your project in a different way. You start looking at your project in a way that it should be testable, in a way that all of your code should be covered by unit tests. And a lot of the hard decisions that you have to make while writing your code that you kind of forgot while doing the architecture, because that happened. You try to think of as many things as possible in the architectural phase, but you'll always forget some things. If you start coding after that architectural phase, you'll run into some, you're writing a method, and halfway through the method you'll just find out that you overlooked something. What happens then, if you're already coding, is that you'll come up with a solution on the spot, and this might work out sometimes, but it's better to find out and make that decision while writing tests, because there's no actual code there yet. So whatever decision you can make there will not be influenced by all the work you've already put in, or the dependencies you've already created, or the assumptions you've already made. So it's a really good way to do it like this. And another nice thing, because you made all those decisions in the testing phase, is that the actual coding phase, so when you actually start building the project or the product after the testing phase, that will take a lot less time, because you've made all those hard decisions, and you just have to work it out, if that makes sense. You just have to write the actual functionality for everything that you've been writing tests for. All right. So hopefully we're at the point now that we're all sitting like this. I should start writing unit tests. I hope that was enough to convince you that you really need unit tests. So let's talk about how you can do it. I'm not going to discuss all the frameworks, but the one I like to use and the one I use is PHP Unit. And WordPress core also has support for and uses PHP Unit. So PHP Unit is the framework for unit tests in PHP, one of the frameworks for unit tests in PHP. And It's partially a PHP framework which you can extend in your unit tests, and it's partially a CLI tool that you can run from your terminal or command line to execute and see the results of the unit test. So created by Sebastian Bergman, and one thing I really like about PHP Unit as well is it's really easy to set up. So if you go to the PHP Unit website, I think it's like 5 commands to set it up, to get it working. And I don't really, and that's what I also like about products like this. I know how to write unit tests, but I don't know, and I can actually say I don't have a clue how PHP Unit is set up in terms of how it works with all the CLI commands and everything, but I just know how to use it, and you don't need any in-depth knowledge of unit testing frameworks or whatever when you start writing your first test. In terms of the actual unit test, there are some requirements, and I should actually quote the requirements here because I think these are requirements, and these are, in my opinion, what make a good unit test. But like most of the things in PHP, you're free to do basically whatever you want, and it will compile and it will run as long as there are no parse errors. But in my opinion, a good unit test should be able to run on its own. It should be isolated. I think this is one of the most important requirements for a good unit test, is that it doesn't depend on any other unit tests or whatsoever. So say, for example, in WooCommerce, we are unit testing the cart functionality, and we have 50 unit tests written for that. I don't know if we do, but let's say we do have 50 unit tests written for the cart functionality. Sorry for that. I should be able to remove half of them, and the other 25 unit tests should be able to run without any problem. I should also be able to take the first 10 and put them on the bottom, and they should be able, it should be able to work as well. It should still pass. It's really important. When you start relying on other unit tests, it is possible to do so, because at the end of the day, you're still running in a PHP environment, so you have this sort of session from start to end when the code is executed and when it's done. So it is possible to set crazy things like globals or whatever, but I really don't recommend you do that. Like your code, a unit test should be easy to read. A unit test should be quick to execute, because you'll find out once you get the hang of it, and once you start writing unit tests, you'll start writing a lot, especially because they should have a single assumption. They should test just one thing. You'll end up writing multiple unit tests for one method or one function. So if your unit test takes a couple of seconds, that might sound all right when you have 5 unit tests. But when you have a big project, or your project grows and your unit tests grow as well, you could easily be executing thousands of unit tests. And if they take a couple of seconds, then we're losing one of the advantages of unit tests, which is that it's time saving, especially because you're going to be running the unit tests, hopefully, and then we're going to talk about that later, but you're going to be running the unit tests on multiple PHP versions, and in the case of WordPress, on multiple WordPress versions. So say you have 1,000 unit tests, there will be like 10,000 unit tests running on each commit, so you want them to be quick. And you should have self-explaining function names or method names, and that you should take that quite literal. So if you're testing, if you're able to add a simple product to cart, in my opinion, your method name should just be test underscore add method add single product to cart. Like if you read the function name without reading the body of the function, you should be able to just know what the author of the function intended to test there. So if you're using the WordPress core unit test framework to test your WordPress project or WordPress products, you can check out the develop repository, and all the WordPress tests are included there. And you can then use the unit test framework that WordPress created with basically inherits from the PHP Unit one and adds a couple of WordPress functionality, a couple of WordPress functions. So you should either inherit from the WP one, or if you want to go without WP, you should inherit from the PHP Unit framework test case. That way your class will have all the assertions and all the PHP Unit methods and functions. And if all the functions and all the methods that you want to be picked up by PHP Unit that you want to run should start with test underscore. All right. Let's talk about how I like to set up a unit test. This is a piece of a blog post of William C. Wade. And this is where he first introduced a pattern that he called arrange, act, assert. And it's nothing groundbreaking, it's nothing new. You can apply to unit tests in any language, with any framework that you want. But it's a pattern, and I'm quoting that. You obviously can't see it, but it's a pattern about how you should set up your unit test, how you should structure your unit test, in my opinion. So a couple of good things about the AAA pattern is that if you apply it to your unit test, you will make them easy to read, easy to follow, understand, and maintain. So let's talk about what arrange, assert, AAA stands for. So arrange is the piece where of your unit test where you set up all the necessary preconditions and inputs. This basically means, if you're familiar with UML and with the test cases that you create from scenarios, is that there's always a precondition, right? So there should already be 2 users that are an administrator in the WordPress database, or there should already be a product in the cart, or something that an assumption that should be there in order for your test to work. It's the arrange part. The actual action, the act part, is it's defined on the AAA website as act on the object or method under test. This basically is do whatever you want to work, plainly said. So what you'll do is you'll check if you actually won't check, but you'll add something to your cart, or you'll try to add a user to the database. And then the final part of the unit test, you'll assert, use an assertion, which is the assert part. You'll actually check if whatever you did in the act part of your unit test worked. And you'll be doing this preferably with a single assumption. So I've mentioned it before, it's an assertion if you're completely unknown to unit test. An assertion is checking if something is what you expect it to be. I'll show you an example after this slide, but if you want to insert 2 users in the database, you'll be checking in the assertion if the total users in the database is 2. There are a couple of assertions. I just listed a few here. There are a lot on the website. I know this link is pretty, it's referring to the 3.7 manual. I think I'm currently at 4.3 already, but I know that I've noticed before that I referenced to a 3.9 or 4.0 version, and people were using assertions that weren't there yet. So if you're going with 3.7, you'll sure that your methods are there. Just when you run PHP Unit, you'll see which version you're running, and then check the manual of that version. A quick example, I'll go through the code line by line. So we'll start with the arrange part. I don't want to show too much code, but this is a unit test I wrote for WordPress core, which tests if I'm able to add if I'm able to get 2 users of a specific role using the WP user query. I wrote this test because I created a patch which allows you to create users of multiple roles in the WP user query, which is at this moment not possible. And in order to do that, I had to change the WP user query a bit, and I had to also check if a query that people were used to, that people are using at this moment, where they fetch a user by string instead of an array, is still working. So in my arrange part, I use the factory of WordPress. So this class is extending the WordPress unit test framework, and I'm using the method create many, and I create 2 users of the role subscriber. I then act on my user or my test. I do the actual action, which in this case is creating a user query, which should get all the users with the role subscriber. And then I do my assertion. So I assert equals 2, and then I count the total results I get back from the actual user query. This should be 2 if it's working, and if it's not working, it can be anything, but then this assertion will fail. So if you're running your user test from terminal, if you've never seen terminal before, it isn't as scary as it looks here. As you can see, I did the PHP unit and I ran it on the user group in the WordPress core. This is a screenshot from some time ago. And it failed here. So it actually was a different function, but I broke something with my patch, which I found out this way, which is nice because this is a classic example of that I had no clue that I was breaking this, but I did. So if it fails, it will display a capital F in red, and it will then list why it failed, which line, which method. This is something I ran today on WooCommerce Core. This is the kind of result you want to see. You'll see the amount of unit tests that have been executed, and you'll then see that it went okay. 124 tests have been ran, almost 500 assertions, and there are no errors. Something else you'll see in this screenshot that I'll talk about in a bit is that a code coverage report has been generated locally, which is something I really like, so we'll talk about it in a bit. There are some great tools out there to help you locally, but also in a hosted service kind of way. I would like to just, I don't know them all, and I don't have time to talk about all of them. I just want to talk about a few of them. Some of them are well known, some of them I only know recently. That really helps you in getting the unit tests in your day-to-day task. And one of the obvious ones to start with is Travis. Travis is a website, a service, whatever you want to call it, that with a small configuration file for Travis in your code, and by subscribing and filling in some information on their website, they will run your unit tests for you in a way that you've configured in the project. So in the case of WooCommerce, we'll run, for every commit, we run 5 times the unit test suitcase that we have on different types of PHP versions and different types of WordPress versions. And we do this for every commit. So imagine doing this, even though it's time saving to have unit tests, you don't want to do this manually every time. So we just have Travis installed, and Travis will check every commit, and they will check every pull request. And whenever something goes wrong, it just email a couple of people, project maintainers, and the one that actually did the commit, to tell you that something went wrong on which version and whatever. As I said, it's also doing this. It's also integrating on pull requests on GitHub, which is a really nice functionality if you're getting a lot of pull requests, which we do on WooCommerce. We'll just have Travis run all the unit tests on the actual pull request of the fork that the user made. So obviously we still have to check what the user is committing in his pull request and what the user wants to change. But as you can see here, that Travis done all the checks here, and in terms of unit testing, this pull request is okay, which for me personally makes it a lot easier, or gives me more confidence to merge in pull requests that in code makes sense, and then also, but are from unknown users, because you'll know that from what you know the code looks okay, and then Travis kind of backs up that feeling with saying, I've just ran 500 tests on it, and I couldn't find anything wrong with this code. So this is a really nice thing about Travis. Another nice thing is the PHP Code Coverage library. You integrate this in your PHP Unit file, configuration file, and it's actually a separate library, extension, whatever you want to call it, and it generates code coverage reports of your complete project. So it's kind of confronting to see, but at WooCommerce we're currently at 21%. We recently started writing unit tests for WooCommerce, so we're going. It's a really big project, obviously. So we're going. We're getting to a higher number pretty rapidly. But if you don't have a coverage report, it's hard to keep track of what did you test, what didn't you test, and using something like PHP Code Coverage enables you to see on a project scale, but for example also on a file scale. So the class WC card file, you'll see which files have methods that are completely tested, which you can see in the first column. They're either 0% or 100%. And on the second column, you'll see it on a line base. So you'll see that, for example, the check card item validity method is actually in line 71% tested, but because it's now 100% tested yet, the overall score is still 0%. And you can even go deeper. You can scroll down and actually look into the method that's not 100% yet and see what lines you're currently testing with the current unit test you've got. So in order to have the add to cart method in this case completely tested, we should try to add a unit test which tries to add a product which has a quantity of 0, which is not in stock anymore. If we write a unit test and we'll call it test underscore add product out of stock, and we'll just do the arrange assert lines there, we'll be able to get that extra line covered and work towards a higher coverage. And there's also, of course, there's a SaaS integration for that. There's a site Coveralls, which is coveralls.io, which uses the same tools but does it automatically. Like Travis takes away the PHP unit from your local machine and puts it in the cloud, whatever you want to call it. Coveralls does it for your coverage report. So each commit, they'll check if your coverage went up, went down, or stayed the same. And it's a really nice way of tracking the coverage of your project, especially because both of them also have badges. So they'll have the first one you'll see is a grunt badge. That's a different one. But then you'll have two dynamic badges. The first one is Travis, build is passing. That will update if a commit has been done to master, which breaks the build. And the second badge is the coverage badge, which are nice things to have in your README. Just have a quick overview of the current status of your project on GitHub. All right, that's it in terms of presentation. As I said, my name is Barry Kooij. You can find me on Twitter at KageNow, and I write at barrykooij.com. And I will now open the chat to see if there are questions, but I had to close it because it started autoplaying. I'm just going to go there and see if there are questions. Let me close this real quick.
Hey Barry.
Hey man.
I am going to join and help with questions.
Cool.
Cool. So I'll feed them to you, and then we'll just take it from there. So first question we have here is, are there any set of common WordPress test cases that always need to be run for theme?
So the nice thing about extending the WordPress unit testing framework is that you'll be able to configure it in a way that you also run the WordPress unit testing framework while you're running yours. And if you do that, you'll be able to test if your theme breaks anything that WordPress should do. So you won't be releasing anything that breaks a WordPress default build. In terms of functionality, it really depends on your theme, right? So if you start with test first and then code, you'll have everything covered. And basically try to cover everything, and else go for the most complex things. And in teams, there's a lot of front end work as well. I only covered PHP unit testing in this talk, but there are multiple tools. But I know one that's called Jasmine, and Jasmine is actually a JavaScript unit testing framework. So I imagine that a team would have a lot of JavaScript as well. And yeah, definitely test your front end with unit tests in a frame as well.
Awesome. So next question is, many people say that unit tests should only contain one assert. What is your opinion on that, and why? Then I guess I've noticed that WooCommerce has a lot of, is it asserts? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So my opinion is that it should. And in an ideal situation, you must do it. But I've been writing a lot of unit tests for WooCommerce over the past couple of months, and I got into situations where I ended up writing multiple assertions in a single unit test as well. And that's basically the result of writing your code first and then writing your tests. Because if you would write your tests before your code, you will be able to write all your tests with a single assumption. So short answer is that if you can do only one assumption in your test, definitely go for that solution. That's in my opinion the best way to go. Thank you.
Cool, great questions here. Next one up is, how can you test stuff within an if statement, such as is admin or is checkout?
Good question. So is checkout is an example that I had to test. The problem is that these kind of things that that need to be tested aren't actually written in a way that they're easily testable. So is checkout is cheatable in WooCommerce, for example, because the is checkout, if you click on the actual body of the function, you'll see that it checks if a specific page is set, or it checks if something is defined, if a constant is defined. So you'll be able to kind of cheat your way into testing that by defining, setting a certain constant, setting a certain define to true. So I think that define something like WooCommerce is checkout or something like that. Just set that to true before you actually do the assertion and do the actual acting. So do that in your arrange phase. And I've never done is admin before, but I guess it does a similar check. So just open up the not really nice friendly unit testable function like is admin and see what it checks, and cheat your way into that. Just if it checks if a certain page is set, just set that page before you do the actual unit test. That's your arrange phase.
Sweet. Next up, Paul has a question. Says, do you run unit tests on pre-commit hook manually or during a CI build process?
So I used to work a lot with the pre-commit hooks in things like Travis and everything like that. So they used to run. I got PHP Unit installed, but I normally don't run it locally because it's always done somewhere else. So when I used to do client work, it used to be done by something called Jenkins, which deploys continuous integration to different websites and does all the unit testing for you there. And now we just have Travis, so we set up the Travis file, and Travis does the testing for us. And I don't even run unit tests on my own computer anymore, because if it breaks, then Travis will notify me of it. So it's not really a question, but or not really an answer. But I don't do either. Sorry.
Great. Next one. What about a quick and dirty menu walkthrough testing or test?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
What about a quick and dirty menu walkthrough testing?
A quick and dirty menu walkthrough testing.
Oh.
I don't understand that question, sorry.
Me either. If someone wants to kind of elaborate on that, I'll go to the next one. We'll go back to that. So for plugin testing, do you recommend the WordPress core test setup or something like WP Mock?
Who asked that?
Paul.
All right.
Paul's got so many good questions. Paul, you win the award for.
No, because the funny thing is that I talked this over with someone yesterday who has a really strong opinion on it. So I've used only the WP unit test framework so far, but I've read a lot of good things about, for example, WP Mock. It's hard. So if you're like a really, if you're an experienced developer and you've done unit testing before and you just rolled into a WordPress project, but you know your way around unit tests, I'll definitely go for something like WP Mock, because at the end of the line, it's a more sophisticated way of doing things, in my opinion.
Cool.
Sorry?
I said Koen likes it.
Yeah, it's a good way to go. But if you're new, or if you want to contribute, obviously unit test to WordPress core, then you'll have to use the WordPress unit test framework, which I know we're using for WooCommerce. So it's definitely not a bad way to go. It's just not the best. So that's a decision you'll have to make for yourself. In my opinion, just to add to that, is that if you're at the point of making those decisions, you're doing a really good job, because you're writing unit tests and you're way beyond other people. So,
Colbert, I just reading the chat here. Looks like, to kind of go back to the question, was quick and dirty menu walkthrough testing. This person says he's asking of old school test as you build type of testing. Does that make any more sense?
Not for me, sorry.
No. This isn't my thing, so I'm sorry that I can't help either.
No, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we'll take it offline if you guys want to take that in chat after.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Anyone wants to start talking about that, that would be sweet. Next up is, what kind of project do you think it's worth to write unit tests for? And then, this is from Koen. Would you do it in any project, or is there a size of the project that makes you do it?
So my experience is that if you're doing client work, it's the worth equals budget. So the worth is it kind of depends on what you define with when is a project worth writing unit test. If you mean worth in code quality, in maintainability, I should write unit tests, would write unit tests for every project. The problem I've experienced in client projects is that you'll always get clients excited for writing unit tests, because you're telling them that their project will be more maintainable and better quality. And then at the end of the line, when there's a price at the bottom of the offer and they're able to stripe through certain posts, they'll always stripe through unit tests. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, obviously if you're writing a 5-page website for your grocery shop in the street, unit tests aren't the most important thing. But if you're writing one for an insurance company where people can get insurances online, and every minute it's not working or it's bugged, you're losing a lot of money, then unit tests are obviously a must. Thank you.
Cool. Great questions here. Next one is, let's see. What are some WordPress-based projects that you've seen that lack unit testing? Good question.
Yeah, a good question, but I don't know.
Start dropping names.
Start throwing mud. No, I'm actually I'm really happy to see that so many well-known products, like WordPress products, are already doing or are really hard working on. So in the e-commerce space, WooCommerce has been doing it for some months now, and I know that one of the other big ones is does the downloads of Pippin. I mean, Pippin is a bigger advocate of unit tests than me, so I think he wrote like 1 trillion posts on that everyone should write unit tests, so that should be 100% covered. And
if
I
only
know
we
that
could all be like Pippin.
Sorry?
I said if only we could all be like Pippin.
Yeah. And so I actually don't know of no, I don't know of any projects that don't have them, mainly because I'm not someone who looks a lot into if other people are doing it right. I tend to focus more on things that I'm involved in and just trying to do my best there, and not trying to see what other people are doing wrong.
So cool. Yeah, great answer. Some cool chat going on that too. Jenny says maybe we should be factoring unit tests as part of the development budget. Kind of going like whether that would be something that's worth it, and then kind of there's a difference, I guess, between client projects and one-off client projects and long-term projects. So it's kind of cool that.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely if you need to maintain something in the long run, it's definitely worth writing unit tests for it. Because I mean we're human, and I don't know. I don't know how this is for other people, but I can barely remember what I wrote 2 weeks ago. So if I need to pick up a project that I wrote 6 months ago, and there are no unit tests, then I'm going to create stupid bugs that could be easily prevented if I just took like 3 days extra or whatever is relevant for that project 6 months ago.
Cool. Hopefully I'm not repeating anything here that you've already answered. So one here is, are there any solid, viable alternatives to PHP Unit? So I guess maybe you did touch on this a bit.
Yeah, there actually is one, and I can't remember the name now.
We'll get back to it. So
I can get back to it.
Yeah, cool. We'll get back to that, Justin. Next one, we're flying through these. This is awesome. How do you test projects based on highly dynamic data when most of your code base interacts with a database or online services and remote APIs? So it's mostly not solid ground and things can break outside your testing control. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense actually, yeah, especially the API example. So I've not done this before, so I'm just coming up with this on the fly. But what I would do is that pray to God that the API has unit tests, obviously, because that's a big thing. But what you could do is, instead of using the API in your unit test, which will make your unit test really heavy and really time consuming, is just use a sort of static cache of the response that you would expect the unit test to give. You can automate that as well, make it a shell script or a run script that just, whenever their API updates, it just caches their API responses to specific calls and let your unit test use that cache instead of the actual APIs. And that way, your unit tests stay fast, and you can still test if you'll break anything internally, but you don't have to query their API or whatever external source every time.
Sorry, I'm laughing here. Brian Krogsgaard has kind of added a question that's rose to the top pretty quick here with 6 votes. Do you listen to 50 Cent when you do unit testing?
No, I don't think I'll get that, but it's probably a joke.
Amazing. What did 50 Cent say to his grandma? That's another question. I don't know that one, but right, lots of jokes going on here now in the final hours of WordSesh. Let's get serious again. Do you recommend using PHP Unit annotations like covers, group, etc.?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you recommend using PHP Unit annotations like covers, group, etc.? Don't know what that means.
Like PHP documentation.
Yes, I guess so.
I guess that what that means. I've actually not done that before, but that makes sense. Yeah. So that's really up to whatever. I mean, if you're like an India developer, whatever you're used to, but if you work at a company, whatever the policy is, yeah. So I'm not using it, so I can't recommend it, but it sounds like it makes sense.
Cool. Last one, I think. Then we're done, and it's the last question. So, there's another one after this. It seems like the main knock against TDD is that it's sort of boring, rigorous. A word I've never seen. It's probably pretty common relative to just driving in and writing code. What would you say about this? True, but worth it, or fun when you get into it, or something else?
So I didn't get the complete question, but I think the core of the question is if I think unit tests are boring or not.
Yes.
Right. So okay. So one, I think it really depends on the kind of the type of person you are. I personally really like writing unit tests. If I haven't done it in a while, it takes some time to get back into that flow. But I really like the the possibility of making of creating tests in an automated way, right? So putting some artificial intelligence, if you would like to call it like that, and putting that in your code. So I really like that. So I don't think it's boring at all, but I know a lot of people who hate it. So, but I really like it.
Cool. Last one. No, they keep popping up. We have time for these. So this is, I don't know what. How would you recommend WooCommerce extensions to start with unit tests since it requires WooCommerce functionality?
So in terms of unique WooCommerce functionalities, it's pretty easy. You got a PHP unit or unit test bootstrap where you can load whatever you want. So you can just load WooCommerce. Yeah, it's funny. It's like we as WooCommerce extend on WordPress to see if we don't break anything in WordPress. I think WooCommerce extension should extend our framework again. So they add their own unit testing framework or unit tests to their extension, and then they run those and run the WooCommerce one to check if they don't break any core functionality in WooCommerce. I think that's the best way to go. And if you would do that, I mean you're the first one that I know of that has units. I think maybe Skyverse has some, but I haven't seen them publicly. So it would be really cool. If you want more information on that, you can always ping Skyverse. They do a lot of unit tests as well, and a lot of WooCommerce extensions.
Cool. So Drew got back to us about the covers and grouped them before. So annotations are for documentation. Covers specify what method, class, object, type test cover, and groups tests together. There's a link in the chat. So.
Oh, all right. So in your unit test configuration, I guess. I must admit that I am more of a unit test writer than of the person. For some reason, I don't know why, but I'm always the one who doesn't set up the project. So I know that WordPress core has groups. For example, when I was writing unit tests for the user part of WordPress, there is a group for that. I think that's what you mean. So you'll be able to run unit tests purely on the user part, and I think that's great. I think that's a great way to go if you have a large project, because you can also exclude. I think a lot of people exclude their Ajax functions and everything like that. Way.
Cool, Barry. I think that's all the time we have.
All right.
It was really really great to have you. Let's
I
guess continue the conversation in chat. If anyone else does have any questions, where can people find you, Barry?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on Twitter at KHNL, and yeah, just shoot. It's 140 characters, I guess.
Awesome, Barry. Thanks for doing this again, and great to have you.
Bye. Thank you.